Thank you, Professor Landy, for your introduction and for inviting me to share a bit of my work today. And thank you, Professor Liu, for the invitation and for the conversation leading to it. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to share with you some work that I'm developing at the moment. So I look forward to your questions or comments at the end. Here I go. Auto del Juicio Final, possibly the first play ever performed in the New World, is attributed to Fray Andrés de Olmo, who arrived in New Spain in 1528. In the opening scene of the play, at the sound of the flutes, Saint Michael descends to earth and delivers the following warning. O creatures of God, hear the divine orders of God, how the world and the things created by God will end, how they will be lost. They will be lost. All the things that he made, every kind of bird, every kind of animal, and you as well will perish. By the time this play was staged, the audience would have had an inkling of the dangers they faced, of all that was being lost to colonial plunder. Still, the inclusion of unidentified birds and animals inserts this religious drama in ecologies perhaps barely known by its author. Saint Michael is followed by penitence, then followed by time. I am time, he says. Time is a divine sign of God bestowed on me, and of which he put me in charge. Every day, I take care of them. I shout into their ears, remember the Creator, God the Maker, the Sovereign. I tell them, I want to save you, but they fail to benefit from my life, from my work. Time keeps reminding them of their obligations. Time warns them that he will soon be gone. Time seems to have entered the stage again, as we worry not so much about divine judgment as about the planetary verdict. As we hear of the disappearance of birds and many types of animals, of communities in danger. I imagine time not in the form of a man arriving from the heavens, but as a rumbling from below. Time has taken intensely material qualities, approaching as rapidly as the rising sea encroaches on land masses, shockingly visible in small island countries. And as the coast returns to the oceans, they take pieces of our past with them. In Puerto Rico, archaeologists are rushing to document indigenous sites dating back 2,000 years before rising sea levels destroy them. Falco Kester, Director of Culture Heritage Engineering, explains, it is literally being washed away. A big part of what we're working on is to make the invisible visible and make sure it stays in our memory. Palominito, the islet where the first scenes of Pirates of the Caribbean were set, chosen for its blue calm sea and bright sun to serve as the visual language for a happy ending is now completely submerged. Creatures and beings are lost, and there is no shortage of messengers shouting in our ears, reminding us of our obligations and warning us that time will soon be gone. The current proliferation in public discourse of the language and imagery of apocalypse, that Christian genre of time almost up, signals precisely a renewed concern with time. Apocalypse is an imaginary of temporal rupture anticipated, that is, imagining what will happen, but also remembered, what we know already happened. Apocalyptic stories are built from pieces of past stories to warn readers to change their behaviors in the present. We all know, however, that Christian apocalypse has been problematic for climate change, not only for its violence, but also because it seems to accept the destruction of the earth as a fair cost for a redeemed world beyond it. This story imagines that our future will take place somewhere else. You see, I have the image here of an opening in the heavens, as we often imagine the future moving. Imagining that we're moving elsewhere seems to imply that we don't need to worry about what happens to the mountains, the birds, or the sea around us. In fact, by the end of the story, there is no more sea or mountain or island to bear witness to earthly pasts. But thinking about time, I'm interested in going beyond that kind of anxiety about time almost up, that apocalyptic sensibility. I'm interested instead in a more capacious sense of time, one that helps us understand how past, present, and future relate to each other in the materiality of our world, how the past remains in our surroundings. So even as climate future occupies much contemporary cultural production, many communities work arduously, religiously, to understand our past and the ways in which it affects our present. Many declare that apocalypse is not approaching from the future, but actually from our past. They assert, in other words, that the past remains as a vital dimension of the present. Reflecting on the effects of Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5 hurricane that devastated New Orleans in 2005, Barbadian poet Kamau Brathwaite turns his gaze toward the persistent past. My position on catastrophe is, he says, I'm so conscious of the enormity of slavery and the Middle Passage, and I see that as an ongoing catastrophe. So whatever happens to the world after that, like tsunamis in the Far East and India and Indonesia and now New Orleans, to me, these are aspects of the same original explosion, which I constantly try to understand. We may be tempted to treat such statements as mere poetic flourish, given that the connections between 16th century colonialism and the present seem such a far reach. But alternatively, we can ponder what it suggests about how past events become ongoing realities, ideologically, spiritually, and materially. We may consider how colonial practices materialized in soil, water, entire ecosystems, and human lives. We may try to understand the ways in which our conceptions of and our relations to the more than human world emerge from these colonial projects and continue to materialize in our worlds. Geologists provide us their own stories about how time remains, extending across even longer time spans than Brathwaite's. These include stories about rupture, about long periods of planetary stability that ended abruptly. Think about the time before and after dinosaurs. Drawing attention to such ruptures when things change so drastically. Geological stories unsettle the entrenched belief in the stability of non-human nature. They remind us that loss also shape our world. Geological stories also concern the power of the past in the present. They tell us that we are surrounded by evidence of things that endured through long periods and many changes. The past is palpably present in rocks, landscapes, groundwater, glaciers, and ecosystems, as geology Marcia Biernerud explains. Stating the importance of relating to past, present, and future, she adds, stories of the past hold up the world, envelop us in the present, and set our path into the future. Despite so many material witnesses to our world's rich temporality, she diagnoses a cultural reluctance or inability to face time directly. We don't know much about the long histories of the land on which we live, and take decisions about the future based on short-term outcomes, like the financial profit for a quarter of a year, or the political impact in 2 or 3 years of election cycles. So Biernerud counsels her readers to develop habits of mind and practices of timefulness, for which she draws from Buddhism and Native American traditions. Practicing timefulness entails sensing the presence of the past, holding the memory of the present, and caring for the future. The notion of timefulness, as she develops it, is both descriptive and prescriptive. It is descriptive in the sense that it teaches us how time materializes in the world around us. And it is prescriptive because it urges us to cultivate something akin to mindfulness, the capacity for attention, to be present enough to understand the past is all around us and constituting our world. My interest in the materiality of time did not emerge from geology, of course. It has been nourished by Caribbean art and thought, which prepared me to recognize the significance of timefulness. This is a tradition from which Brathwaite draws. their stories about distant and proximate time rely on attunement to material elements like sea and sand, trees and rocks, and the roles in present and past. I will share with you some of these stories, focusing on the work of writer and philosopher Edouard Glissant. Like many post-colonial writers, Glissant is concerned with history, with the legacy of imposed histories, and with the necessity of writing new ones that can ground each community's right to exist. And this, at the end of the day, this is Glissant's main concern. How do we develop narratives that can support each community's right to exist? This can only be accomplished, he argues, by cultivating the relationship between communities and their more than human surroundings, thus making ecological and political aims in his work inextricable from each other. So the political is always ecological for him. In this talk, I will follow Glissant's poetic as exemplifying timefulness, both articulating a material understanding of time and guiding his readers toward developing the capacities to experience time meaningfully. Throughout this talk, I will explore the themes that I just mentioned: sensing the presence of the past, holding the memory of the present, and caring for the future. The first section will focus on stories about distant ancestral past, remembered through engagements with the sea. In the second section, I turn to more proximate pasts, which Glissant develops by observing how the past materializes in our landscapes. I end up with some reflections about the future and its possibilities. Of the sea or catastrophic time. I begin with the catastrophic times of colonialism, with stories of uprooting and loss, of which the sea is our witness. Glissant writes this story of origin repeatedly, as if returning to the sea demanded each time this ritual of storytelling. In its best known version, he describes the Middle Passage as a debasement more eternal than apocalypse. African captives were wrenched from their everyday familiar land, away from protecting gods and community, snatched from the human and more than human surroundings that has structured their experiences of time. Many of them did not survive the journey. Some were thrown overboard, weighted down with balls and chains. Glissant recollects their absence by envisioning the traces of this violence at the bottom of the sea. These underwater signposts mark the course between the Gold Coast and the Leeward Islands, he writes. Navigating the green splendor of the sea still brings to mind, coming to light like seaweed, these lowest depths, these deeps with their punctuation of scarcely corroded balls and chains, end quote. Those who survived the horrific voyage arrived in the Caribbean shores as others were being uprooted. They met the first inhabitants who had also been deported by permanent havoc, Glissant adds. Native peoples were the first to experience the catastrophe brought about by the Spanish conquest of America, as they were wrenched from the land, gods, and community. They were enslaved to extract gold, forcefully relocated from their villages to be close to gold extraction points, sometimes in other islands, sometimes in other continents. Some managed to escape to the mountains or to islands not yet colonized, even as the landscapes all around them rapidly deteriorated, as their world became strange. Most died at an astounding speed. This was their apocalypse. Native and African experiences of uprooting and displacement, of worlds destroyed and invisible presences, converged in the Caribbean islands. This was a rupture in history, a rupture in the quality of being. It was also a physical rupture, a rupture in geography, Dion Brand observes. Glissant invites his readers to imagine the experience of losing access to the place that had nourished their being. Feeling a language vanish, the word of the gods vanish, and the sealed image of even the most everyday object, of even the most familiar animal vanish. The evanescent taste of what you ate, the haunted scent of ochre earth and savannas. A chasm opened between their past and their Caribbean present. This is an unusual origin story, isn't it? Because instead of emphasizing continuity, as historical narratives tend to do, it invites us to dwell in experiences of discontinuity and diffraction. It is a story of communities that could not take for granted their own existence and have lasting relations to catastrophic beginnings. By holding the memory of events that made the past discontinuous with the present, that destroyed the conditions on which they depended for collective meaning-making, we insert our awareness of rupture into historical consciousness. Returning to such stories may prepare us to acknowledge the catastrophic times that have materially and existentially shaped many other communities as well, and to become alert to ruptures that are happening all around us today, as climate change propagates and accelerates processes of uprooting through ecological devastation. Many people are being forced to leave their ancestral places, their communities, and their rituals because climate change has changed their worlds drastically. Even if the stories are often told in terms of their effects on human beings, they highlight how the destruction of physical worlds can be devastating for human communities. In the case of the Caribbean, these stories of endings invite us to think about time differently. By reflecting on the connections between time and place, between seascapes and collective meaning, between memory and ritual. Sea and sand still remind us of the perplexing relationship between a catastrophic past and the present. Instead of moving linearly from a past to a present, Glissant imagines time moving as the waves do, carrying remnants of past histories materialized in sand and algae and minerals. And as the waves of the sea repeatedly touch the shore, slowly depositing elements carried from its unseen depths, we, too, return over and over to the sea. I salute you, old ocean. You still preserve on your crest the silent boat of our birth. Then you lay out these new shores. Those are Glissant's reverent words offered to the sea. And with these words, he joins multitudes across the Caribbean who continue to pay their respects to oceanic divinities and the memories of ancestral pasts through engagements with the sea. Such spiritual practices teach us to sense the past in the present. Observing the coast, we sense the deeper significance of its erosion, not only because it troubles our present projects, but also because we lose touch with the remnants of our past. Ruptures in human times are ultimately about more than humans. They are historical, ecological, and spiritual, including organic and inorganic materials, human-made and more than human-made, distant and proximate. Recent works by Caribbean writers and artists foreground these connections. The sculptures here are from a work called Vicissitudes by British Guyanese sculptor and environmental activist Jason Taylor. It features a ring of children holding hands under the sea. Cast from children with diverse background, they were meant to be a symbol of unity and resilience in light of environmental disasters. But locally, it was interpreted as a tribute to those who had perished in the Middle Passage, even if simultaneously they were also seen as reflections on the ecological present and futures. Taylor uses materials like pH-neutral concrete to foster coral growth. These sculptures are made for oceanic beings to create complex and dynamic assemblages with them. The hope is that sea creatures will transform the sculptures, even if the sculptures end up losing their shape completely, and use them for their own survival. As Valerie Loichot observes, Taylor's art enables alliances between the human drowned, underwater roots and growths, and the sacred. They are works of creative vulnerability that remember the past as they point to the future. In Taylor's work, as in the work of many other Caribbean artists, the memory of catastrophic past and present ecological concerns don't cancel each other. So we don't need to forget the past to pay attention to ecological issues. Instead, in the ocean, traces of ancestral past coexist with the life and death of seaweed, corals, and fish, with temporalities intersecting, diffracting, cutting each other, producing unexpected crossings between human histories and oceanic ones. Of trees and rocks or sedimentation. The interlacing between human and more than human times is more intimately rendered in stories about the proximate past. Approaching the past through the landscape is politically and existentially important, Glissant argues. And he provides numerous models of how to write in ways that are smushed by mud or shaded by trees. He tells stories about maroons taken in by the acoma trees and surrounded by dense networks of ferns, vines, and violets. Strikers trapped in prickly pineapple fields, flowers losing their scent to global commerce, volcanoes riding on sand, beaches forgetting their past as they give in to tourists' claim to own them. His retellings draw us closer to the diverse landscapes engaged in the process of history. Perceptiveness and connection to the surroundings with this sense of timefulness can guide us to overcome the limitations of colonialism and its conceptions of time and of history, Glissant argues. If colonialism and slavery, with their geographic and temporal ruptures, made our relation to our surroundings, what we call nature, discontinuous with the accumulation of experiences, what we usually call culture, we must now reestablish the links between them, that is, between culture and nature. The aim is not to reduce histories to one grand narrative, as colonial accounts tend to do. I mean, we have an example here from a textbook that mapped the entire history of humanity, or supposedly mapped the entire history of humanity. The convergence of different histories and temporalities in the Caribbean islands relieves us from the linear hierarchical vision of a single history that runs its unique course, he argues. Not only are histories always plural, but so are times. Instead of striving for inclusion in an all-encompassing time, we seek to understand the multiplicity of times that constitute the world. Here's Glissant again. History is spread beneath the surface, from the mountain to the sea, from north to south, from the forest to the beaches, maroon resistance and denial, entrenchment and endurance, the world beyond and dream. The meaning of our landscape can only be traced on the underside. It is all history. The past remains as deposited sediments in the places of our existence that continue to actively constitute our surroundings and through them shape us all. Even if we cannot know all the details of the history that shaped that mountain or a grain of sand, it doesn't change the fact that they are witnesses and participants in human history, and yet they move at their own pace. Learning to regard our surroundings as meaningful, socially and ecologically, is affirming their endurance and ours, even in the aftermath of catastrophe. If mud and trees and ferns, alongside the people who endure in the land, constitute history, how would we describe the contours of its time? Time is marked by the materials, organic, mineral, human-made sediments accumulate, changes, and passes. Sediments of the past interact with the present, and different temporalities, colonial and oceanic, continental and Icelandic, aerial and mineral, cross each other, converging, cutting into, or subsuming each other. Even speaking of human and more than human times, as I have been doing here, is too homogenizing for what I am envisioning. Time is not the same everywhere. Even though we humans have learned to aggregate times from multiple places and beings, separate them in segments and periods, and organize them in progressive narratives. The temporalities of corals and mountain verdure, of displaced native peoples, of African captives, and global traders intersect and may converge, deflect, or interrupt each other. Temporalities of capital can and do engulf others. We sometimes need overarching frameworks to name certain trends, as we do when we name the Anthropocene. But we also need accounts of distinct temporalities to more fully imagine not only the ways in which the speed of a community's progress disrupts the cycles of the forest or the movements of the sea, but also to perceive how oceanic time rubs or clashes against Caribbean time, dispersing remnants of its human pasts. We may even need to imagine the oceans enduring much longer than we do. So holding memory of the present implies a capacity to perceive these multiple temporalities and timelines that coexist in and constitute the present, to honor the many histories, slow and fast, human and mineral, visible and invisible, that shape the very ground on which we stand, and acknowledging that we are entangled in these processes here and now. Of possible futures. I have taken my time getting to the future, sketching an understanding of time as enfolding the materiality of the world. And still, I hesitate. Because too often, future talk dismisses the power of the past in the present. The very sense of timefulness I've been trying to develop today. We hear calls to focus on the projected future outcomes rather than taking time to understand and repair the harms of the past or its reverberations in the present. Such futures are imagined as rendering the past irrelevant, as if welcoming the future demanded abolishing the past. Conceived that way, future talk occludes the effects of past injustices that persist. It ignores that the very worldviews that produced past catastrophes continue to shape our world and its unyielding inequalities. Perhaps this is why there is not much talk of future in Glissant's work. I find the future in his recurring statement like a testimony or a prayer. I believe in the future of small countries. He believed against all evidence, and that hope is expressed in a commitment to abide with the Caribbean, seeking imaginaries that can nourish endurance. Excuse me. Future also comes up indirectly when he's asked about utopia in an interview late in his life. Utopia is necessary, he says, but I don't think we can approach utopia with fixed ideas. The earth tremors now. It tremors. I think that as far as utopia goes, he continues, something fundamental would be to make palpable all the approaches to the sacred that haven't ended up in religion, but have remained at the level of the sacred. These statements are too opaque to serve as the basis for theorizing futures, but they are a crucial starting point for me. For turning toward the future, I fear losing my footing, losing touch with the palpable approaches to the sacred. What places do we turn toward to contemplate the future? Do we stand on the edge of what was not long ago a beach to look toward the watery horizon? Do we turn to the skies to feel the textures of the air? Do we press our hands against the soil? Do we have ceremonies to care for the future? Caring for the future really does require unlearning the abstractions of time inherent in modern habits of thought. Understanding that time leaves its traces in the invisible depths of the oceans, in rocks, landscapes, groundwater, and ecosystems. Remembering that this has never been just our time. Recognizing the multiplicity of temporalities that constitute our worlds will allow us to observe when human actions are moving too fast, for our trees to grow up, the soil to replenish, the corals to adapt. We may even learn about and nurture past visions for the future, those imagined by our ancestors that have been forgotten or foreclosed. Excuse me. Caring for the future also requires attunement. I have shared with you Caribbean stories about the deep sea, corals, and trees as examples of practices that orient us toward our surroundings, and partly as an invitation to find which stories can help you orient yourself toward your surroundings. This attunement can help us understand the importance of the here and now, how our collective practices leave sediments, spiritual, intellectual, and material, that accumulate and constitute the world's possibilities and its vulnerabilities. We also need ceremonies and spiritual practices that help us connect at a deeper level our attunement to the surroundings with our past toward the future. For we are the ancestors of those futures. Thank you.